going on, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Podium Picks. I'm Sean Woodland with Tommy Marquez. We are inside the Working Against Gravity studios. Working Against Gravity, Tommy, and we talk about it. They are on top of the podium as far as nutrition services go. And if you follow their guidelines and you get on board the Working Against Gravity train, you might wind up on top of the podium too.
Yeah, whatever your personal podium might be, whether you're trying to, win the local 5K or you're just, trying to get into fighting shape for, the winter season, if you will. Working Against Gravity is an online nutrition coaching program that pairs you one-on-one with your very own nutrition coach. Through that, you'll do weekly check-ins. They'll help you set a set of nutrition protocols that will fit in with your lifestyle, whether you're ketogenic or whether you're following, an intermittent fasting program, or you have specific dietary needs and things that you're trying to balance out. I know they've worked with everyone, a wide range of people, ranging from, people that are trying to, level out hormones and things like that because they're trying to get pregnant, or they're just trying to fix years and years of bad habits that have put them in a bad spot internally. So whatever it is, they can help you get there. Working Against Gravity is, our presenting sponsor, and I'm proud to say I've been a member of Team WAG for almost 4 years now. They've got a special offer for all of our listeners. If you go to workingagainstgravity.com, click sign up and join the wait list, type in the code ELITE50. It'll get you $50 off your first month. Really, if you're looking for a way to kind of dial in your nutrition, there's no better time now to do it, especially when you're home at quarantine. You have time to prepare your meals and do all the things that you usually wouldn't be able to because of timing, because of that busy schedule. Definitely can't recommend it enough. Workingagainstgravity.com, code ELITE50.
Yeah, really appreciate them being on board as our sponsor. Also want to thank our sponsor, Whoop. And one thing we're doing for our Podium Picks episodes is we used to do this on our main episodes, but we figured, hey, this is a good thing to incorporate into the Podium Picks. We always want to talk about our top, day strainers or top recoveries, top sleepers, top, day strain average for the month. So we have a whole bunch of categories we'd like to look at. And Tommy Marquez recently put up a big Uno on the recovery score. So we figured that we would look at our top recoverers for today's episode. How are you feeling, by the way, after putting that one?
I'm feeling a little bit better. I was in Salt Lake City, so I was at elevation, and I had a 20.5 day strain the day before.
Man.
So a lot of things weren't working in my favor. I was eating clean and behaving. Obviously, wasn't slamming down wobbly pops, but I still had an awful recovery score, and it was just one of those things where it all lined up, and at elevation you have a hard time breathing and recovering. So in that vein, we're going to look at our top 10 recoveries, top 10 members of our Whoop group based on recovery. Let's go for the week.
Okay.
Because I had a rough week last week. We're going to start this week off good. So our top 10 for recovery right now, number 1, Bernard Moulton, 98%.
Nice work.
Russell Smith, 98% as well. Renata Novotna, 98%. Lisa Bowers, 98%. Daniel Richmond, 97%. Matt Tyler, 97%. Victoria Parrish, 97%. Bill McDonald, 97%. Sean Anderson, 97%. And then Anthony Lewis rounding out the top 10 with a 97% of his own. We got a lot of people in the green, absolutely crushing the recovery with the resting heart rate and HRV. So congrats to our top 10 for recovery score for this week so far for our Talking Elite Fitness Whoop group.
Yeah, good job, guys. You've gotten 100 a couple times, right, in recovery? Have you ever?
I've gotten 99 once. I haven't gotten 100.
I think 97 was my best one. So yeah, good job, guys. Good work on the recovery. And thank you to Whoop for being our sponsor. If you guys want to check them out, whoop.com, and you can enter the code TALKING15 to get 15% off, and you can optimize the way you train. So definitely check them out at whoop.com. All right, today's episode of Podium Picks, we're going back in the CrossFit realm, and we're looking at fantastic finishes. So our best finishes for various events that we've watched throughout the game season. I think there's some great candidates here. There are one or two that I think are maybe far and away deserve to be on top of the podium. And then I actually had to leave some out. I started kind of brainstorming some of the good ones here, and I kind of went down that, one leads to another and leads to another. I was like, oh, maybe I should put that in there. And I think I left some good ones off here.
Yeah, so there's some good ones. I want to talk a little bit about criteria. I think it's
Okay.
we haven't talked about it a ton about like what fit our criteria ahead of time. For me, there was a couple of things that really stood out for fantastic finishes or epic finishes. One is competition relevancy. You know, there's tons of exciting finishes and sprints to the end line or the finish mat, but they have to have some sort of bearing on the competition as a whole. I like ripple effects in terms of maybe what it does for a career arc, or maybe it adjusts in how we approach competition in some aspects. And maybe if it stands out as someone's career as something that really is a hallmark of their performances or their character or their you know, performance as an athlete as a whole across across their entire lifespan as an athlete. So those are a handful of things that really stood out to me that I tried to keep in mind when I looked at these fantastic finishes.
Yeah, I agree with all those. In fact, I'm glad you said that, because there were a couple that are on my list specifically for some of the reasons that you just said, and others are on there just because I loved it. So I don't know if I went as in depth as you did, but there are definitely a couple that meet your criteria that I use as well. So I think we're gonna have a good variety, but I'm pretty sure as we get, I think we might have a couple of the same as well. But I will kick off this week. How about that? I'll kick and I'll start with Spirit of the Games.
Okay.
So my Spirit of the Games, and this is to me, this finish sort of embodies what CrossFit is all about and what the CrossFit Games have come to be all about, with both the men and the women being put on equal stages, the equal prize money, sometimes the women's competition being more of a draw than the men's competition, and you rarely see that in big time sports. I think in CrossFit, a lot of times that is the case. This is back in 2016. This is the trail run, and it's where Sam Briggs passed Brent Fikowski at the end, because we talked about this. We would talk about this frequently in CrossFit events where we would have men and women competing together, and that we always had the women who won always beat a ton of really good male athletes. And more often than not, it was Sam Briggs doing it. And this definitely illustrated that. And what I loved about that finish is that you can see Brent thinking, oh no, I do not want to get passed by Sam Briggs. And actually, even though they're not competing together, no bearing whatsoever on Brent's score, but you can see him kind of try to kick it into a different gear. And I think Sam also said, oh no, I'm getting you. I'm coming after you. And she chases him down, and she's able to beat him across the finish line. And to me, that just embodies, again, what CrossFit is all about. Everybody being on equal footing as far as the competition goes. And you know, it's cool to watch the men and women compete together, because again, you often see a lot of women beat the men in the exact same event. So that was really cool to watch in 2016 when Sam Briggs passed Brent Fikowski there, because Fikowski was having a really good event. So that's my Spirit of the Games. My dark horse. Now this is in line with sort of career arc type of thing. So this goes back to 2011. Now the finish itself, like, there wasn't an exciting finish as far as, like, it was close, but this was, I believe it was the first event inside the tennis stadium in 2011, and it was the rope clean event. Oh, and it was the first time that Rich Froning had faced a rope climb since what happened in 2010. And everyone was wondering, okay, how is he going to handle this? And I was actually there in the stands. I was sitting in sort of the lower bowl, close to where he was finishing, and I remember him just smashing that event. And then he did the final rep, stepped over the finish line, and I think at that moment, everybody knew, okay, no one is going to catch this guy.
Oh, Lord, he coming.
Yeah, and it also showed how, and I think Fraser is the same way, that if either one of them has a deficiency, they work on it until it becomes a strength. And it was very clear, because he looked so smooth going up that rope. It was crazy just what a 1 year difference made. So to me, that finish was sort of the beginning of the mythos that is Rich Froning.
I remember standing in the little media pit run right there on the side. I was standing next to Rory, and I remember he finished that workout and stepped across the mat, and Rory looked at me and went, oh, and then said an expletive. And I think everyone, just by the sheer, just kind of shrank a little bit, because you're like, oh, the big dog's in the room right now. It's funny, because now that you think about it, one of my favorite shots of Froning is on the rope in 2014 when he on Thick and Quick. And Matt Fraser talks about it. He's like, dang, how's he getting down so fast? Where he's just sliding and controls at that moment. Funny, just That's a huge career arc thing. That's awesome.
Yeah, so those are my two. Spirit of the Games, Briggs passing Fikowski for the trail run in 2016, and then my dark horse, Froning, winning the rope clean, the very finish there when he stepped across the finish line and said, this is going to be mine for a long time. Like Pat Sherwood used to say, I'm not working out with you. You're working out with me.
Yes. Yes.
All right.
You know what made that Fikowski pass so much better is that he was running like Forrest Gump when she passed it,
yeah.
and the way it was shot when he like comes into frame.
Yep.
Oh, that was
I was running.
So my Spirit of the Games is Chris Spieler passing Graham Holmberg in the 2012 Games track triplet.
Yeah, that, you know what? That was one that I left off.
Yep.
So I'm glad you included it.
So this was where this lacks in, I guess, like overall competition relevancy, because neither of them were on the podium that year, and it was early on in the competition. But at the time, both of them were, Holmberg had won. Both of them by that point are pretty much CrossFit legends. And the track triplet was this kind of interesting workout where you had split snatches.
Yeah.
And I think Daniel Tominski, who won the event, has set the top time in the previous heat. But Spieler and Holmberg were going toe-to-toe this whole workout, and it finished with a 400-meter run around the track. That was when they used the track area at the Home Depot Center before it was the StubHub. And I'll never forget the final bend coming around the turn, and everybody's trying to pour in, and I have this picture because we used it as a highlight for so many of our, and that kind of tells you how iconic that shot was, of as Chris and Graham get close to the finish line, Spieler just lays out. And anyone who's ever run track on an all-weather track, the surefire way to just tear your stuff up is to lay out on an all-weather track.
Was that sorry to interrupt, but was that before chip timing?
I think so.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that was before
I think it was,
chip
which is why he went kind of head first.
Yes. Yeah. And the result was Spieler won by 1/10 of a second over Graham Holmberg to finish second in that event. I'm pretty sure it was his best finish of that year. And it's just one of those things when I think about Chris Spieler's career and like him just always being the David versus Goliath, like that's one of those moments where like he's going to outgrit you. He's going to put everything he has, the heart into it. And that's one of those moments that stood out. And we used it for basically every highlight reel for like a 5-year span, especially for CBS and all that good stuff too. So my dark horse pick. And this one,
you agonized over this one.
Yeah, this was really tough. Probably because this is the most negative I'll get about it. This one definitely affected the career arc, I feel like, of at least one athlete. And for the most part, this is less about what was done in the workout and more what wasn't done. And I think, in my opinion, this is one of the greatest no-rep calls that I have seen in CrossFit Games competition. And this is at the 2016 Atlantic Regional Men's Event 7 finale. Now, if you remember, this is, I believe, is thrusters and legless rope climbs. And going into it, there is a very tight race for basically spots 2 through 5. 3 through 5. Noah Olson was pretty safe. Ben Smith was pretty safe. But then beyond that, Travis Mayer, Gary Helmick, Jacob Anderson, Jeff Evans were all in the hunt for it. Now, Jeff Evans made the games in 2014, made a splash as like the really strong guy. I believe he was the first CrossFit Games athlete actually to clean and jerk 400 pounds. I absolutely love his story as someone that battled depression, overcame attempted suicide and really struggled with some things growing up to become a collegiate athlete and eventually make the games. Now, this final heat came out swinging, absolutely swinging. And for the most part, Jeff was leading the way. It was a situation where any one of those athletes, it was win and you're in. Jeff is leading the entire way. Towards the end of the workout, maybe even the round of 15, maybe in the round of 9 on the 2 and 3, gets hit with a no rep from Mike Giardina. Mike G is a CrossFit Games team athlete himself, member level 1 staff, Flowmaster. longtime CrossFitter, where he gets warned before, but as he's getting up to the top, right before he touches, he pinches with his leg. And it was one of those moments that even though Jeff went on to finish 5th in that workout and the margins were close, 2nd place through 7th was separated by 4.5 seconds. So, I mean, everybody sprinted across the line, but you knew in that instant that kind of dashed Jeff's hopes. And he kept, to his credit, he stuck with it. Even with a no rep on a legless rope climb when there were only a handful in that workout, he still managed a top 5 finish. But he ended up finishing 9 points out of a qualifying spot. Hasn't made a comeback since. It kind of stopped the comeback for him. And then Gary Helmick slipped into that 5th place spot, making an individual appearance at the CrossFit Games. And that was, man, I remember everybody just being like, oh my gosh. And people in the crowd were heartbroken. And I remember going back, they showed the replay and you're like, yep. I mean, it's a strict call, but it was the right call. And I remember feeling equally heartbroken for Jeff and equally like proud of Mike for sticking by the call. It's very easy for refs to get swallowed up in that. And that was just such a huge, and the finish was still great because everybody sprinted to the end. And it was just one of those ones where, like, on the inverse side of it, this crazy no rep led to a crazy finish at the end. The point spread was tight, but it was the right call.
Yeah. I remember, I got to give Chase Ingram credit on this. He was the color commentator for that broadcast. And I remember him, speaking of, like, it was getting caught up in everything. It's very easy sometimes when, you're a former athlete like Chase and you're a level 1 coach, you see these guys a lot. It's very hard to separate yourself sometimes and like have to criticize people or say, you know what, that was the right call. And Chase did, and he did a great job of breaking down the replay to show that it was, the order was, it was hands, feet, and then go. And he did feet, or it was touch, hands, then go, then feet.
Yep.
And you could very clearly see, like you said, and Chase did a great job of breaking that down. And I remember him say, they can boo all they want. They can boo and they kind of like it, but it's the right call. So that's a good one because I think you're 100% right about Jeff with that. Like that kind of, you wonder what would have happened had he made it.
Yeah. Cause he was an exciting athlete to watch. And there, a couple movements or a couple of things that you would have liked to see. I would have loved to see him do the deadlift ladder. I would have loved to see him do the squat clean pyramid. A ton of events that I think he would have smashed. But it's also the one where, like, that's what makes it a tough no rep, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't a capacity thing.
Right.
It was the technicality of sport. It's like, you talk about the difference between a Super Bowl champion and a runner up is, did you tap, in the end zone correctly?
Exactly.
And it doesn't mean you couldn't catch the ball. It's just it's a matter of inches. So
rules are rules.
Yep.
All right. Well, those are two good ones. That was a really good dark horse. I like that pick a lot. Let's get to the podium, and I'll start with 3rd place.
I think we're gonna have a few same ones.
We absolutely are. They're just gonna. I think they might be in different order, but 3rd for me, and I struggled with this because 3rd and 2nd for me were pretty close, and it just came down to I just like my 2nd place one better. I just liked it better, and I think my 3rd place definitely I think meets your criteria a little better than the 2nd one. But I just like the 2nd one so much.
Yeah.
And so 3rd place is Fraser in the suicide sprint in 2016.
Oh,
what can't this guy do? Because that was the like Froning in 2011. Here comes Matt into these 3 50-point events that he did not need to win. He just needed to avoid disaster. And I think the prior year in the sprint event, he was like in the 30s. I don't know specifically, maybe 33rd, something like that. Horrible
worst finish.
Worst finish. And I just, we're watching the event, calling the event. It's like, okay, was it? I can't remember who was out front. Maybe Bramblett.
And Ben Smith was out.
Yeah, Ben Smith was out there. But and then Matt was kind of hanging around. And then at the last trip down, I'm going, what? Are you okay? And then when he wins that heat, didn't win the event, won the heat. It was clear, like, all right, you're not beating him.
Yeah.
That to me was when he became invincible. Because if he's going to go from 33rd to 2nd in an event, good luck beating him in anything. And I remember the quote that he had after 2016, after he won that year, because he only won, I think, one event.
He had a ton of seconds, which was ironic.
He won the trail run. And at that time, he was the first guy to ever win the first event and go on to win the whole thing. And I think he was talking to Pat Sherwood again, and he said something like, he he said, yeah, I won, but I got beat in 14 events or whatever it was. And that was when I went, that really backed it up. Like, oh, you want to win everything, not just the whole competition. But that moment for me was it just showed that he is one of those guys that understands he has a weakness, and he's not going to work it to get it to the point where it's just not detrimental to my overall effort. I'm going to work this until I can beat people in it consistently. So third place for me was that. And then, of course, I got to give a shout out to Marshall Sawyers, who technically won the heat while carrying the camera. So
he ran half the heat.
He did run half the heat, but still.
And give credit to yourself for the call, because Matt said that was one of his favorite things.
I mean, that was one where, and a lot of times, just to give people an inside peek, when there's going to be a big moment, we kind of know what we're going to say. You kind of write it out and get it. That was just genuine, holy, you know what? This, let's all go home. This is now over.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's third place.
Okay.
Matt Fraser and the suicide.
So I'm going to admit something right here. I didn't put that on my list.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So I took a slightly different approach to it.
Okay.
Because, and I like that we took a slightly different approach to it, because I was more so like, that is more like sheer excitement of the finish and like the result. I went a little bit more like there had to have been an adversary next to you. So my third place is the 2015 West Men's Regional Event 6 finale. And I'm going to explain this. This is where the legend of Cole Sager as the comeback kid at regionals truly began. So, and kind of in retrospect, when you look at it, the circumstances around it are absolutely insane. So, second place through seventh place in the finishing order were separated by just 6 points total. 6 points.
God, I miss regionals.
6 points for 6 places. Absolutely nuts. And 5 of the top 7 athletes overall finished that event finale within 8 seconds of each other. Ooh. So you're talking bang, 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 bang. People crossing the finish line. Everybody trying to figure out what was going on. And coming into it, Cole Sager was outside of the top 5. And everyone's like, oh my gosh, he is like the favorite. He's an up-and-coming athlete. We think, how could he go from, qualifying his first year, doing decently well to someone that we think is going to win the region to potentially not qualifying. Cole comes shot out of a cannon, takes first in the event, goes from outside the top 5 all the way up to second place. Now, Lucas Parker, who won the region that year, finished second in that event, just 0.5 of a second behind Cole for second place in the finale. If Lucas goes a half second faster, bang, bang, right across the finish line, and they switch places, Sager would have lost 5 points on the leaderboard, would have dropped 4 spots, finished in a tie for 5th with Cody Anderson, and then who finished 6th that year, 1 point out, and then would have missed out on a game spot on a triple tiebreaker with Cody Anderson, because they each would have had a first place, a second place, and then Cody Anderson would have won on the third iteration of the tiebreaker. And we wouldn't have seen Cole Sager go to the games that year, where I believe he was top 10. So, and that also kind of set up the following year when he basically did the same thing all over again. And to me, that was kind of like, when I think about the resiliency of Cole Sager, like the guy that just like you can't count out, that's when it all starts. And to me, that was a career defining moment for him.
Yeah. I remember watching that, and that was what was so fun about regionals, is that we had times where we could actually all sit there when we were in between, hits, and we would all get into it. It was crazy. It was like sitting in a sports bar. It was a blast. And that was, I remember like all the stuff that had to go right for him that year, and it ended up going right for him. So
the West kind of got a reputation for being the wild, wild West, right? And Brandon Domain was always the one calling it. It was always the last regional left. And it was like, being a West Coast sports fan, all the East Coast games are done, and everybody's just sitting around watching all this wackiness come over on the left coast. And man, that was absolutely insane. And then they picked it up 2 years later, with another crazy finish with Cole, and then, George Sanchez just going full send on a sandbag. And that was just awesome. And that always stood out in my mind. And that's one of my favorite regional moments.
Yeah, that's a good one, man. I didn't take into account a lot of regional events, but now that you mention that one, there's one I'll mention at the end, one I probably should have put in there, but I didn't.
Okay.
So now we're at second place. It's a silver medalist here in my fantastic finishes, going back to probably one of my just favorite events ever at the games in 2014, push pull,
Oh,
tennis
yes.
stadium
Oh,
under the lights.
I forgot that
And
one.
it's Rich Froning, Ben Stoneberg, and Josh Bridges, all basically fighting for the lead. And it was such a cool visual event. And that's where I think Dave Castro really hit a stride as far as providing a visual element that added to the excitement. So you had the sleds on the floor and you could see them, kind of moving and how close they were.
Yep.
And I remember just there was something special about being under the lights, man. And we would always talk about how well, Josh Bridges did in the tennis stadium. And he gets back to that pull for the final time, and he gets down, and then we see, and Rothy cut it great, our director. You see Froning kick off and start to run back. You're like, oh, it's on now. Here it comes, and Stoneberg comes, and Josh is pulling on that sled for all he's worth. No one's sitting down. Everyone's going crazy. And then you could see, we cut to the wide shot, and you could see that Josh's sled would move and Rich's sled would go really eat into it. Like, oh no, he's not going to be able to hold him off. And then Josh's would move again, and then Rich would get a little bit closer. And to watch that battle between the two of them, and then what capped it all off is that Bridges wins, and you get one of his signature celebrations right there in the tennis stadium in front of all the fans. And I think he just said a bunch of stuff just started coming out of my mouth. Like, that's a genuine reaction.
Yeah,
I heard him say that, and it was just a great event. And that finish was to see Josh Bridges, who was his fan favorite. Everyone loves Rich, obviously, too. To see two fan favorites going head to head like that, and then have the respect for each other afterwards, and have the fan reaction, the crowd reaction that you did. That finish to me was that was really fun to watch, and it was everything that was great about the tennis stadium all in one little moment.
I agree completely, and I would like to posthumously offer a retraction to my list because I left that one out, and I don't know why. I'm such a dummy for leaving that one out.
No, you got that, but that's okay.
Yeah,
I left out some regional ones.
I was so focused on regionals for some reason. That literally is like the quintessential tennis stadium moment for me because of everything that you said, and like you mentioned. I talked to Josh recently about an article that I wrote about one of my favorite games moments, and he was just like, yeah, I never planned those. It was literally, I just had so much stuff inside of me. I had to let it out. It was like, I don't know, like Black Panther suit where it just builds up energy and eventually it has to let it go flying. And like you said, the respect from Rich and Josh. If you remember, Rich wasn't in first.
Yeah.
Then. That was the event that put Rich in first, and he needed those points.
Was Olsen leading that time?
I think Olsen or Fraser was.
Yeah.
And so it was like for him to jump up and immediately give the bro hug to Josh. That was like that moment and that experience there almost transcended the leaderboard at that time.
Yeah, it was awesome,
man. All right. Oh man, I'm jealous because I forgot that one. But my second place involves Rich Froning, and this one is me being a little bit more technical, and I'm going to cheat a little bit. So this is actually 3 events back to back to back. So this is Rich Froning and Scott Panchik at the 2014 Central East Regionals.
Yep.
And so event 3 was Nasty Girls 2.0. Then event 4 was this brutal triplet of front squats, bar facing burpees, and strict handstand push-ups. And then event 5 was the legless event where you basically had to sprint to the end of the floor, come back, do a legless rope climb. And it all started with event 3 in Nasty Girls 2.0, which, if you remember, muscle ups, pistols, hang power cleans. And this finish was the start of 3 back-to-back finishes where 2 seconds is what separated them across 3 events.
Yeah.
And it led to what a lot of people dubbed the Froning rule regarding how athletes are allowed to finish a barbell movement and continue forward to progress through a workout. Now, Rich and Scott are going head to head, neck and neck, and they're side by side at this point. And it comes down to the final set of hang power cleans on the workout. And this is, I think, also captures Rich's mid-workout guile to kind of in terms of awareness. Scott does the hang power clean where he bounces it off the hip, doesn't hinge forward with his hip, stays vertical, and just pops it right back. And it's a little bit faster. Rich was a little bit more methodical. And Scott picks up some reps on Rich. So they're rep for rep going into the final one. Scott finishes it, pops it down forward in front of him. Rich stands it up, pops it over his head so he can run forward unimpeded by the bar
Mhm.
and beats out Scott by a second. And it was one of those moments where you're like, oh my God, I can't believe what I just saw. And holy smokes, Rich is that smart to like, even when you beat me, I still beat you kind of situation. The very next event, they do that, and you're like looking for them to bounce back. They actually tie because Scott chases him down on the bar facing burpees. If you remember,
Yep.
Scott Panchik was the burpee king in 12.1, and actually jumps over the barbell onto the finish mat in one fell swoop, and they tie.
And they were right next to each other too,
right next to each other. And then on the legless rope climbs, they were 1 second away, and I think like 8 people finished within 3 seconds that because the Central East was just a beast. And that was one of those moments where for a glimmering second, you thought that Rich was going to get pushed and had some competition there, even at the regionals competition. And I honestly think that competition at regionals set up the legend of Rich's finish in 2014. Because for that moment, it was like Superman's armor got pierced for just a split second. And Rich goes on to win. He had half the points that Scott did, 10 points to 20 points at regionals that year. But then when Rich had the 333 after that, and you're like, oh, he's getting pushed. He got pushed at regionals. He's getting pushed here. Like it just kind of added to the anticipation. And also it literally changed a rule in the books about barbells that now you have to go that way. And quite honestly, it's because of that, we've had some ridiculous finishes of people tripping over barbells.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
That's a good one.
Yep.
All right. Well, number one, I don't think there was really no shocker here. This is going back to 2017. This is the women's Fibonacci final. Tia Toomey looking for her first ever championship, going up against Cara Webb, now Cara Saunders. And I think that this one, when we talked about doing this as a podium picks, like immediately it was like, okay, well, that's got to be number one.
Yeah.
Because I for all the reasons that you've talked about with your criteria, it kind of started the legend of Tia Toomey. She'd come off 2 straight years where she was so close and had to wait to the final announcement to hear who had won. And it was going to be the same story this year. And just that visual finish of them marching down the floor and Tia being slightly ahead of Cara, but then Cara just starting to catch up, and Tia couldn't see her. Now, I can't remember I don't think there was. The screen in the Align Energy Center is in the middle, whereas in the tennis stadium is at the end. So you could, and that was one thing like Froning used to do. He used to look up at the screen and see where everybody was. Totally smart.
Yeah.
And I think he was the guy who started that, at least with CrossFit. You see a lot in other sports. But Toomey had no idea where Cara was. You had this, there was like the first signature moment inside that building, because we were also used to the tennis stadium and all the memories that we had there and the environment and the atmosphere. And we wanted to know, would the stadium hold up to that? Would the Coliseum hold up to that? And to that point, it'd been fun, but we hadn't had that signature moment. So year one, now we get that signature moment. And sound at that point from the crowd had feeling. Like it was so loud in there. I was calling the event with Tanya Wagner, and we were, we're right next to each other, probably 6 inches apart at the time, because we're both leaning in trying to see the screen. And we have headsets on so we can hear each other, but we had to, we were yelling at each other because we couldn't hear through our, barely hear through our headsets, everything that was going on. And to have it all end like that, and then get to the point where, okay, we don't know, I thought, I was pretty sure I knew who won, but they're always like, you can't say it unless it's official, because we had scoring right in front of us. We knew what Cara needed to do in order to leapfrog Tia, and it didn't look like it was enough. So I was pretty sure that Cara had not done it and Tia was going to win, but we have to sit there and wait. Then now, not only to have that exciting finish, but then get another one where he pulls both of them out on the floor, and you're thinking, oh, here we go again. And then he makes the announcement, and it's Tia, and then have her reaction to that whole ordeal and the emotion that poured forth from her was that is, to me, still probably the top moment that we've had in Madison. And it was fantastic. I
mean, it's one of the top moments, period. Just to knowing that was the start of the greatest run we've seen, and it's the ascension of the greatest female CrossFit Games athlete we've seen.
Yeah.
And I mean, okay, so no surprise, that is my number one as well. And I mean, like you when you talk about the finishes, it said everything. The buildup was tremendous, included some, and so one of the things I think is kind of underrated about it, if you peel back the layers, is we were set up for that finish an event prior in the 2-2-2-3 intervals. If you remember, there was the controversy around Cara and her overhead squats, with her and her judge miscommunicating and her taking off early. And that, even though they sorted it out, and I think they made the right call and they assessed her the right penalty and everything worked out and all the athletes signed off, and it just added a little bit of something, you know, like, all right,
what if?
Yeah, there's a little bit of edge here, you know, and, you know, on top of that, 2 country women going toe to toe, like, you know, as the workout progresses, there's failure on Tia Toomey's end. Cara resurges because it looked like Tia was going to win. Like it wasn't going to be a good, and then that darn left arm, come on, left side, come on, strong side, just wouldn't stay up. And then, you know, for Cara to answer the bell accordingly was amazing as well. And, you know, it comes down to milliseconds. It's the closest point spread for the top spot in CrossFit Games history. And the seed for this finish, not only was it built up, but the seeds were planted for this finish at the first event.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
If you remember, there's the one run, swim, run was the first event. Tia and Christy Aramo were in a foot race for the run, swim, run event win to start the weekend. Tia wins by less than a second. Had it gone the other way, assuming all things equal,
she would have finished second overall.
Cara is the champ. I believe Tia would have actually still had the lead going into that event, but her point spread would have.
Cara would only needed to beat her. I think Cara needed to beat her by at least 2 spots and beat her by 1. But so to your point, Cara would have had 4 fewer points going. I'm sorry, Tia would have had 4 fewer points going into that final event had she not beaten Christy Aramo, and then we have a different outcome. And
that's just one of those, when you look back and you look at the scope, you're like, oh my gosh, like every little point counts. So that is a moment that I'll always remember where I was, who I was with, and what I was doing.
Yeah.
I was hosting the Day at the Games desk, and I was alongside Dan Bailey, Brooke. I believe Annie was over there with us too. And I remember seeing that happen. We're watching it from the beer garden. And for like a split second after, you could hear a pin drop. I mean, like, I'm pretty sure one of the kegs went out. So you could hear like the CO2 cartridge. And I just look, and me and Dan Bailey locked eyes. I mean, CrossFit ladies, eat your heart out, first off. And both of our faces were like, just jaws dropped.
Yeah.
And I put my hands up and I went, what did we just watch? And Dan goes, it can't be. There's no way she just lost it 3 years in a row. And then we figured it out. But man, it was, I even thinking about it now, I get goosebumps. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Well, it was crazy, but
I don't know how I don't know how a finish could be better than that.
I don't either. And here's the funny thing: we were talking about calls and planning things out. Like, I knew what I was going to say. I'm like, all right, here we go. She's marching to the finish. I'm going to start it now. We're going to get her across the finish line. So I start what I was going to say, and then she drops the thing, and I'm like, well, there goes that moment. So now,
selfishly, you
just ruined it, Tia. Why couldn't you get? So if you go back and listen to it, with my commentary, you can hear me start the, I forget, like, something about, I want to say she comes from the land down under, but right now she's on top of the world. Like, so that's what it was going to be. And I start I start that. And then the thing, like the dumbbell comes down. I'm like, damn, there go. But I get the excitement of the moment made up for it, because it was just, everyone was going bananas, including us up there. But that was one of those where, I give Dave credit, because when you have that march to the finish line, there's something pretty dramatic about that in a final event. So it sets itself up very well. But had she not dropped it, I would have been able to get that out cleanly. And
that's a great line too. Yeah. That's another podium picks for like the boneyard of Sean's calls that got messed up by people,
or by me. There's a lot of those.
I mean, we could. To be fair, we get through our chases one where he tried to replicate the fronting multiple years. I always love to give him crap about that one.
Man. Dude, which ones did you leave off?
Okay, so definitely some of the ones that you had. I also had. There's a couple other like subtle ones that weren't like huge, but Tasha Persevich at East Regionals 2016. It was a win in a year in thing between her and Danny Horan. Now Danielle Jenny, and she just came out and absolutely smoked the workout to make her very first CrossFit Games. I selfishly like that because that was the beginning of what I felt like I had a true grasp on the dark horse pick at this, because I'll be honest, she made me look really smart because I was like, you got to watch this girl. She's going to make the games. And she went on and did that. And that kind of started a little bit of a run for me. So I was very grateful for that.
Check out the big brain on Tommy.
Laura Horvath and Aeneas. So,
all right.
She tracked down and beat. It was her and Tia neck for neck, and then she kind of ran away with it. And even though it didn't have implications on the overall leaderboard, that was like the final crowning of this young star. Right. Froning and Double Grace, just the call alone is all time. And like I just remember watching, like, it's another one of everyone's watching it. You're like, this is like right out of a movie, and
it worked out very. I was very lucky on that one. Worked out well,
dude. Was it Sheena that filmed that one from the box?
Yes.
Of you calling it? Oh my gosh! I mean, talk about. Hey, I could have ran through 12 walls that day. Like you could have. I could have lined up separately against the LA Rams and
probably done very well at that point because they were not a good team.
Averaged 5 yards a carry. That was. Oof, man,
thanks, man. That was one where, like, and again, I was watching it and I was going, okay, this is where I got to start it if he keeps his pace. And now if he stops and like puts his hands on his hips, I'm screwed because it takes away the whole cadence of the thing. Yeah. So thank you, Rich, for continuing on that pace because it helped. So I left off when you brought up regionals. How can I forget Con Porter, you legend?
Oh yeah,
I'm upset because first of all, that's one of my favorite calls that Jeremy Austin had.
Yeah,
because it was so it was so quintessential Australian. Like that was so fun about watching Pacific Regional when you had Jeriemy and Danae Brown commentating. It was like their own thing. It was just
Lily on the floor.
Yeah, and there was aspects of their commentary that works for them that it was hard for us to replicate in the United States. It has its own flavor, and I love it. And when Con comes running across, he's celebrating. Jeremy's like, Con Porter, you legend. I was like, oh, it's so good.
Yep.
And we even like replayed it because it was so exciting. And I think that was a similar situation to Cole Sager, where he like had to win that event to get in. So that was one. And then I had one that didn't have major implications on anything, but just an exciting finish. And that was Kristen Holta and Anna Tunnicliffe, now Tobias, in the 333.
Yeah,
so I think that was Holta's first event win.
Yeah, that was. So that was her first CrossFit Games, her first event win. And that year, she actually was the person that knocked Sam Briggs out of the games at regionals in Europe that year. So it was a big deal. And I remember there kind of being some people being like, all right, who's this Holta girl? And why is she the reason that, fan favorite Sam Briggs isn't here? And then she goes out and wins that event. And, look at where she is now.
And we continued to overlook her for a long time. It's just always the Norwegian ninja. She's just always hiding in the shadows there.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
That's another one where I remember, I have the picture of the live replay running side by side. And then Tunnicliffe, I actually think Tunnicliffe maybe injured her foot during trying to sprint out that. But, man.
Those some good ones.
George Sanchez. So I briefly mentioned it. There was the event 6 or event 7 finale, I think 2016, where it was the assault bike. It was 2017. Assault bike, burpee, box jump overs, and then the heavy sandbag cleans. And I remember him just basically going full send. I think he had a crop top shirt on. And Matt Bishop always tells the story great because he was talking about how you could audibly hear Sanchez just blocking out, just with every sandbag clean, just and then just completely like, if like, I'll be honest, if knowing the pain that he was in, if he had like randomly like voided his bowels, I wouldn't have been surprised. It's like that's how far he went into it to pull the event win and kind of book his ticket to the CrossFit Games.
Was that the same year? That was 2017, right?
I believe so.
So that was the year that he went and he smashed the assault bike on that. On the was the assault banger that they had, where he's just like, he got on it and you blinked and he was off. You're like, what the heck just happened?
It was like 50 calories in like 30 seconds or 25 seconds.
It was like, it was something ridiculous. Like I just remember he went and then just jumped off and went check his bike because it's clearly not working.
Yeah. George won. So just to give you an idea, in that event 6, George won first place, and he made up He made up 41 points
Wow.
on Mitchell Stevenson to make it to the games by 4 points.
Dang.
So a 37-point spread.
That's why regionals were great, man.
Yep.
All right. Let us know what you guys think your top fantastic finishes are, because I'm sure we left some out. I was not thinking about a lot about regionals. I wish I would have, because there's some great ones in there. I did think about the Panchik Frony one, because those were fantastic, but there are a lot more out there. Thanks for listening. We'll probably just delve back into the pop culture world next week, so we'll have to come up with something good for that. For Tommy Marquez, I'm Sean Woodland. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll talk to you guys soon.